My brother stole my invention and made millions, so I took his company from the inside. It still burns when I say it out loud. It started with a blinking cursor on my laptop screen, sitting in a room that smelled like soldering iron, caffeine, and relentless hope. That lab had been my home for 3 years. A cluttered paradise of scribbled whiteboards, half-assembled circuits, and carbon converter prototypes humming on long tables. I called it the box. That was our nickname for the modular carbon-to-energy generator I designed from scratch. Clean, scalable, efficient. My obsession since grad school. Dan called it the money machine. "You dream it," he used to say, clapping my shoulder. "I'll sell it to the world." Back then, I believed we were partners. 2 brothers, chasing the same star. Him in his pressed shirts and polished pitch decks, me with oil-stained fingers and notes scrawled in margins. And then, one Tuesday morning, I got a knock at my lab door. It was Andrea, our patent attorney. She stood there, clutching a manila folder like it was a death certificate. "Chris," she said softly, eyes not quite meeting mine. "Can we talk?" I wiped my hands on my jeans and motioned to the folding chair near my workstation. She didn't sit. I need to inform you that as of last Friday, the patent application for the carbon energy conversion system has been updated. I blinked. "Updated?" She opened the folder. Inside, a set of documents I hadn't seen before. She pointed to the line that hit me like a punch to the ribs. "Inventor, Daniel Harper. Filed by Carbon Sync Inc." My name wasn't there. Not in the patent. Not on the founding documents. Nothing. I laughed. At first, I actually laughed. "This has to be a mistake," I said. "I wrote the core algorithm. I built the prototype. Dan can't even wire a toaster." Andrea looked pained. "You signed the reassignment form last month. The IP rights transfer. You sent it from your email." I stopped. My brain started piecing it together. A month ago, Dan had dropped by the lab with a stack of papers. "Standard fundraising stuff," he'd said, waving them like they were nothing. "Investors want clarity. Legalese junk. Just sign where I marked." He'd smiled that Dan's smile. The one that could sell broken umbrellas in a drought. I'd trusted him. I'd signed without reading. I sank onto my stool. The room was quiet except for the faint whirring of the box running a test cycle. The irony nearly choked me. My machine still worked. I didn't. "I'm sorry," Andrea said, standing awkwardly. "Legally, there's not much you can do now. I wish I had better news." She left the folder on the table and walked out. I stared at it for a long time. The yellow paper, the cold ink. It felt like my name had been erased from history. I drove home in silence. My apartment was dark and cold. I opened the fridge, a couple of eggs, mustard, and a half-eaten container of Thai takeout. I closed it. My fingers trembled as I made coffee. No cream, no sugar, just bitterness in a cup. I held it, walked to the counter, and sat. What do you do when the thing you built your life around is stolen by your own brother? My eyes landed on a photo pinned to the fridge. Me and Dan, a year ago, standing in front of our first demo booth. He had his arm around my shoulder. I looked uncomfortable as usual. He looked like he owned the world. I threw the cup. Porcelain shattered against the floor, coffee splattering like blood. I crouched to pick up the pieces, slowly, carefully, like I could glue it all back together. My hand shook. One sharp edge sliced my palm open. A clean red line. I stared at it. Not deep, but it hurt. A reminder. Dan had always been the favorite. Mom called him the leader. Dad said he had vision. I was the nerd, the good student, quiet, a supporting role, Dan once joked during a toast. I believed that. Until the box. That invention was mine. My proof, my voice, and now, he'd taken it. Turned it into a company, raised millions, made headlines. And I was no one. I wrapped my hand in a towel, stood, and looked around. White walls, silence. No more emails from investors, no meetings. No lab. Dan had it all now. The office, the staff, the future. I had a bleeding hand and a broken mug. I went back to the lab one last time that night. Andrea's folder was still on the desk. I flipped through it again. Legal jargon and betrayal. I walked through the lab, touching the equipment, the wires, the blueprints. My footsteps echoed. I stopped in front of the box. It whirred, obedient, unaware. I placed my palm on its metal surface. "You're still mine," I whispered. Then I pulled my keyring out of my pocket. There were 3 keys: my apartment, my car, and the lab. I looked at the third one for a while. Then I placed it on the desk, next to the folder, and walked out. 6 months after I walked away from everything, I became a ghost. No LinkedIn updates, no articles in Wired, no smiling selfies in front of servers, or on stage at TED Talks. I deleted my social accounts, shut off my phone, and disappeared into the part of the city where dreams go to die, and sometimes be reborn. I found the warehouse by accident. It used to be a tire shop. Still smelled like rubber and mildew. One corner leaked when it rained. Pigeons lived in the rafters. But it had a roof, power, and, most importantly, no questions. I bought second-hand equipment with what was left of my savings. Old processors, scratched soldering stations, a 3D printer that jammed every third print. It was pathetic and perfect. No name, no press, just me, my anger, and the core blueprints of something better than the box. Then came Jade. She showed up wearing combat boots and a t-shirt that read, "I void warranties." "About damn time you came out of hiding," she said, arms crossed. "You thought I wouldn't hear what Dan pulled?" Jade and I used to work together in the early days, back when Carbon Sync was just 2 folding tables and a dream. She left after Dan tried to pass off her battery optimizer as his idea. Classic. "I figured you had your own thing now," I said. "I did. Till I realized most visionaries are just thieves with nice hair." She kicked a dusty box. "So what are we doing here, Frankenstein? Building revenge in a basement?" I smiled. "First time in months. Something like that." She looked around, nodded slowly. "It's crap. But it's our crap. We started with the skeleton of my original design, but cleaner, leaner, and fully modular. Something Dan could never replicate because it was 10 steps ahead of where we'd left off." A month in, Jade brought Mark. "Don't ask for his real name," she warned. Mark was tall, twitchy, wore 2 smartwatches and muttered constantly about data shadows. He set up a secure network with no external access, taped over every webcam, built firewalls that looked like something out of a spy movie. When I asked why the paranoia, he just said, "You think Dan's not watching? Please." We called ourselves Novacore. Quietly, privately. No logo, no paperwork, nothing official. Just code names and trust. We worked 14-hour days. Ate ramen. Took turns sweeping the floors. It was hard, exhausting, but it was real. And then came the night we got it working. Jade flipped the last switch, and the humming started. Low, steady, beautiful. We watched the readouts as the new module converted compressed carbon into usable energy, with 28% more efficiency than the original box. Jade let out a low whistle. "Holy crap, Chris. You just built the future." I didn't speak. My throat felt tight. Then she leaned back in her chair, grinning. "You've built a ghost company. Let's make it haunt him." That phrase stuck. I wasn't interested in lawsuits. Dan had buried me in paper once already. But I could outthink him, outbuild him, and maybe, just maybe, outmaneuver him. We started buying Dantech stock through shell companies. Mark had a system, 8 dummy LLCs, each buying small percentages, scattered across jurisdictions and portfolios, all perfectly legal, all invisible. I didn't want control, not yet, just a foothold. The plan was simple: grow in the shadows, build something undeniable, and when the moment was right, take what he thought was untouchable. Still, to move faster, we needed real capital, which meant stepping out just a little. Jade arranged the meeting with Leo at a run-down pub on 4th and Mercer. Smelled like fried chicken and spilled beer. 3 guys nursed drinks at the bar. We took a booth in the corner. Leo was in his 50s, wore a leather jacket and a wedding ring he kept turning around nervously. He had the eyes of someone who'd seen too many pitch decks and too few miracles. "I don't fund ghosts," he said, sipping a Coke. "No offense. We're not ghosts," I replied. "We're an eclipse. You just haven't seen the sun go dark yet." Jade snorted. "He worked on that line for 2 weeks. Leo raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" I pulled out a tablet and showed him the test runs. The math, the prototype videos. No branding, no press, just raw performance. "This is what Carbon Sync promised. We actually deliver." He watched for a while, said nothing. Then, slowly, he leaned back. "Okay, let's say I believe you. What's your endgame?" I looked him in the eye. "To replace Dantec without anyone seeing us coming, until it's too late." He stared at me a long moment, then smiled. "I like ghosts." He wired us $200,000 the next day. Just like that, Novacore had a pulse. We bought better equipment, upgraded the lab, hired 2 more engineers, both women who'd been forced out of bigger companies for not being a good culture fit. Translation: they were smarter than their bosses. 6 months in, Novacore wasn't just alive. It was thriving. No press releases. No Twitter. Just progress. And somewhere out there, Dan had no idea we were circling. But he would. Very soon. By spring, Dantec was everywhere. Billboards with Dan's smug smile. Ads during every startup podcast. Articles praising the revolutionary sustainability platform he claimed full credit for. He had shaved the beard, slicked his hair back, and leaned hard into the image of the self-made genius. But something was off. At first, the cracks were small. A glitch here, a customer complaint there. One university posted a now deleted thread about data corruption in their box units. A tech blog mentioned suspicious power fluctuations. Dantec called them minor calibration issues. But Jade and I knew better. "It's the stabilizer module," she muttered one night, squinting at the leaked firmware logs we'd gotten from a friendly contractor. "They kept your version but stripped half the failsafes. They cut corners to meet launch," I said. "They cut brains, Chris." We'd been quiet, careful. But now, Novacore was ready to move. We applied for the Belmont Grant, a 7-figure, government-funded award for green innovation. Dantec had applied too. They'd won it last year, and everyone assumed it was theirs again. Except this time, they didn't get it. We did. Leo almost cried when he read the acceptance letter. "They chose us," he whispered. "They don't even know who we are." Jade fist bumped me. "Told you ghosts haunt better when they're funded." Dantec's PR team scrambled to spin it. Something about strategic refocusing, but insiders knew. Investors noticed. And Dan was starting to unravel. I saw the footage from a leaked company meeting. He slammed a tablet on a glass table, yelled at a product manager for thinking like an intern, called his VP of engineering replaceable. He wasn't cracking, he was splintering. It was almost sad. Almost. I met Jade at a quiet cafe on the east side. The kind of place with too many succulents and drinks that involved oat foam. She handed me a slim black folder. "This came from Jenna," she said. "Remember her? Used to run product Q&A at Dantec. She's disillusioned." I opened the folder. Financials, code notes, performance reports, real, not photocopies. One section was highlighted, Q2 variance forecast, internal only. I scanned the numbers. My breath caught. "They're bleeding cash," I said. "Yup, and they're hiding it behind inflated projections. It's smoke and mirrors, Chris." I turned the page. Buried in the appendices was a list of shell entities, acquisition targets and affiliates. One name jumped out, a small Luxembourg-based firm that had bought 0.7% of Dantec's stock last quarter. "Us. They don't know it's us," I whispered. Jade smiled. "Yet, we left the cafe separately, just in case." That night, Mark deployed Ghost Scan, a program Jade built to track vulnerabilities in Dantec's infrastructure. Not just the code, the pipelines, the patents, the lawyers they reuse too often. If there's a weak point, Mark muttered, tapping at his keyboard, we'll find it. Even if it's under a mattress in Delaware. Novacore wasn't just innovating now. We were infiltrating. A month later, I walked into a conference hall in downtown Seattle, wearing a name badge with someone else's company on it. Fake startup. Real pass. The place was all glass and over-designed lighting. Everything smelled like money and stress. Dantec was presenting in Hall B. Dan would speak at noon. I didn't care about his speech. I was here for a meeting with a quietly worried investor. His name was Riley. Salt and pepper hair, precision watch type, wore disappointment like cologne. I backed Dan, because I believed in the tech, he told me over cappuccinos. Now I'm hearing whispers. One more public failure and the board's going to start talking restructuring. What kind of failure? I asked, keeping my tone casual. The kind where your competitors win grants you were promised. The kind where performance metrics don't match up in live deployments. And the kind where your ex-co-founder resurfaces with a better product. He looked at me carefully. You are resurfacing, right? I didn't answer. Just smiled. The speech started late. Dan walked on stage in a charcoal suit, no tie. The audience applauded, though it felt thinner than expected. He started strong. Buzzwords, innovation talk, a joke about AI that landed flat. Then he demoed the newest version of the box, and it glitched. Just for a second. But enough. A screen froze. A diagnostic bar flickered red before recovering. Dan brushed past it, but his nostrils flared. He was sweating under the stage lights. From the back row, I saw the subtle shift. A few investors leaning to whisper. Someone typing fast on their phone. A reporter frowning. Afterward, I slipped through the crowd, heading for the exit. Then I saw him, walking alone, jaw tight, talking to no one. Dan. I stepped into his path, like I belonged. His eyes scanned my face like it took him a second to believe it. I thought you disappeared, he said, voice low and hard. I smiled, calm. Ghosts don't disappear, I said. They wait. A flicker of something crossed his face. Anger. Maybe fear. Maybe just disbelief that I dared to show up. He opened his mouth, but I was already walking away. Back at the warehouse, I told the team everything. Jade sat on the floor, legs crossed, flipping through Dan's financial reports like a thriller novel. He's over-leveraged. He's lost 3 key engineers in 2 months. And he's got 5 overlapping contracts he can't fulfill without causing a PR disaster. Mark added, if we leak the right internal memo to the right blog, it'll trigger questions. Stockholders talk. Regulators listen. Leo paced. Are we ready for that kind of move? It'll be war. I nodded. We didn't start it. But we're ready to finish it. Jade leaned back, hands behind her head. Then let's bring down the empire. The Green Tech Expo was a circus. The kind of place where billion-dollar dreams and bankrupt illusions shared the same overpriced coffee. Banners the size of small buildings rippled in the breeze above the convention center. Holograms danced through the air, glowing trees, AIBs, cities powered by invisible grids. Buzzwords floated like confetti, sustainable, scalable, disruptive, and front and center, dominating the day's agenda. Dantec, redefining tomorrow. It was supposed to be Dan's victory lap. Inside his private dressing room, a sleek glass cube behind the main stage, Dan was staring into a mirror, reciting his lines. We believe the future isn't something we wait for, he muttered, adjusting his collar. It's something we build. He looked tired. The bags under his eyes were new. The hairline, just slightly thinner than last year. He rubbed his temple, muttering a silent curse. His phone buzzed. Another message from Riley. Investor seats are packed. Don't fuck this up. Dan shoved the phone aside. He wasn't nervous. Not really. Just tense. Focused. The past few months had been rough. The Belmont loss. A string of unexpected exits from his engineering team. A few bad headlines that refused to die. But today was a turning point. He had a new prototype. A new pitch. And a room full of potential saviors. What Dan didn't know was that the real show wasn't his. Backstage, I stood with Jade and Leo, watching the lights dim and the opening sizzle reel roll on the massive LED screens. Novacore had been quiet, strategically so. For 6 months, we'd bought in tiny pieces, slivers, shares through shells in Luxembourg, Singapore, Liechtenstein. No alarms, no waves. And then, 3 weeks ago, we bought big. When the final purchase cleared yesterday morning, we held 62% of Dantec. Control. Legally, publicly, irrevocably. And today, we would announce it. Jade glanced at me, smirking. You ready for your villain arc? I straightened my blazer. It's not villainy if it's justice. Dan stepped onto the stage to applause. Spotlights followed him as he crossed the platform. The crowd, hundreds of investors, press, tech influencers, and government reps, quieted as he began his speech. Thank you, he said, voice smooth, confident. It's an honor to stand before you today, not just as the founder of Dantec, but as a believer in what's next. Behind him, a glowing Dantec logo shimmered. He launched into the usual climate goals, growth projections, his familiar tale of garage innovation, no mention of the people he stepped on to get here. And then, the screen flickered. Once. Then again, Dan faltered mid-sentence. We've built partnerships across 5 conti. The screen behind him cut out. Darkness. A beat of silence. And then, it came back on, but not with the Dantec logo. Now it said, Novacore. White on black. Bold. Clean. Cold. A ripple went through the audience. Dan turned slowly, blinking at the screen. He turned back. That's not part of the prez. A second spotlight snapped on, and I stepped into it. Applause erupted. People gasped. Dan stared at me like I was a hallucination. I took the stairs calmly, every step deliberate. I wore the dark blue jacket Jade picked out, the Novacore pin glinting on my collar. Dan took a step back. What is this? What are you doing? Relax, I said softly into the mic. This won't take long. I turned to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but there's been a change in leadership. A few cameras swiveled toward me. Reporters raised their phones. Someone in the third row whispered, "That's Chris Weller." Dan stepped forward, trying to regain control. Security. Dan, I said, holding up a thin folder. Sit down. He hesitated. I opened the folder and held up the papers. These, I said clearly, are certified transfer records. As of this week, Novacore Ventures holds 62% controlling interest in Dantec Incorporated. Gasps. Cameras clicked wildly. Dan's face turned pale. No, that's impossible. I looked at him, not with anger, but with something colder. Pity. You should have paid more attention to your shareholders, Dan. You were so busy playing the genius. You forgot how business works. He lunged forward, grabbing the folder. Scanned it. His eyes darted from page to page, disbelief melting into horror. No, this is fraud. I never sold. No, I agreed. But they did. I turned back to the audience. We've reviewed Dantec's finances, engineering reports, and market position. And while we respect the contributions of its founder, it's clear the company needs a new direction. A stable one. A sustainable one. I paused. Then delivered the final line with all the weight I'd waited 2 years to drop. We'll be restructuring immediately. And yes, Dan, you're fired. Then the crowd exploded. A mixture of shock, laughter, and frantic tweeting. Dan stood frozen, folder in hand, mouth slightly open. His image flashed on every screen. The camera zoomed tight on his face. Shame. Confusion. Rage. This isn't over, he muttered, too quiet for the mic, but I heard it. I leaned in. Oh, it is. Security arrived, but I waved them off. Dan wasn't a threat anymore. He turned and walked off the stage, not with fury, but with the limp, stunned steps of a man watching his empire fall in real time. Backstage, Leo hugged me so hard I thought I'd pass out. Jade just smirked. That, she whispered, was Shakespearean. Riley from the board approached with a nod. Congratulations, Mr. Weller. The market's going to react hard. I hope so, I said. We're going to rebuild it from the inside out. Properly this time. He glanced toward the door where Dan had exited. You want us to blacklist him from consulting? No, I said. Let him try. He'll never outrun this moment. Later that night, we sat on the warehouse floor. The original Novacor crew, sipping cheap wine from paper cups. Leo toasted. To the quiet ones, Jade raised hers. To revenge that Scales, I looked at them. These brilliant, loyal misfits who'd followed me into exile and back into fire. To us, I said. And somewhere, on the other side of the city, Dan sat in his luxury apartment, staring at screens that no longer recognized his name. 3 weeks later, the war was over. Novacore, Dantec, we were still arguing over the name was a different place. You could feel it in the hallways, less tension, more light. The old corner offices had been converted into shared workspaces. The sliding doors no longer clicked shut in paranoid meetings. Engineers were smiling again. A few even wore jeans, something Dan would have called a branding liability. I sat at the head of the conference table, watching Leo present the updated R&D calendar. Solar drones, waste-neutral processors, modular wind towers, real things, not smoke and mirrors. Across the table, Jade sipped her coffee and whispered, "You avenged yourself like a polite assassin." I smirked. Did I? She shrugged. You didn't burn the building down. You renovated it. I leaned back. Some ghosts don't like fresh paint. We'd let go of 5 executives in the first 10 days. The ones who had known, enabled, or looked the other way when Dan turned toxic. HR had tried to talk me out of firing them all at once. I hadn't listened. We doubled the engineering budget, introduced mental health days, gave stock options to interns, real ones, not pending evaluation. It was everything I used to wish for when I was one of them. But now, walking past their desks, watching people who didn't know the whole story build something new, I felt something unexpected. Emptiness. I visited my mother on a Sunday afternoon. She still lived in the same faded house, with the same humming refrigerator and the same chipped wallpaper from the year I built my first prototype in the garage. She hugged me longer than usual. "You've lost weight," she said, then added, "You look tired." "Thanks, Mom." She poured tea into 2 old mugs and sat across from me, curling her legs under her like she always did. "I saw the article," she said. "Novacor exec seizes rival tech giant in stunning coup." I raised an eyebrow. "Stunning?" "I always said you were the smart one," she replied. Dan just yelled louder. We sat in silence for a while, the hum of the refrigerator filling the gaps. "I thought I'd feel better," I said finally. "I thought winning would fix something. And it didn't." She smiled gently, the kind of smile that came with old wounds and soft wisdom. "You didn't just beat your brother," she said. "You became better." I looked down at my tea. "I'm not sure I know who I am without him in my way." My mother reached across the table, touched my hand. "That's not true. You've always known. You just finally stopped asking his permission." That night, I walked alone through the lab. The lights were off, the machines silent. I stood in front of the old glass case where we kept Model 1, the prototype that started everything. My design, my idea, the one Dan had taken, polished and pitched as his own all those years ago. It still had my handwriting on the back panel, faded now, but unmistakable. Next to it, under a small spotlight, sat a folder. The updated patent, recently amended and refiled under the rightful name. Inventor, Christopher Weller. I stared at it for a long time. There was no applause, no headlines, no crowd. Just quiet. Just me. And this time, it was mine. All of it.